Two men, both 50, both eat clean. No candy, no soda, no processed junk. One has stable energy, a trim waist, and an A1C his doctor calls impressive. The other is exhausted by 2 p.m., storing fat around his midsection, and his doctor just used the phrase pre-diabetic range. Same commitment, completely different metabolic outcomes. The difference isn't willpower, it's not genetics. It's 5 specific foods that both men eat every single day. Foods that every nutrition article on the internet tells you are good for you. Here's where it gets interesting. Your body doesn't care what the label says. It doesn't read the word natural. It reads glucose. And some of the most aggressively marketed health foods on the planet trigger a glucose response that makes a candy bar look like a mild inconvenience. A 2021 study published in Cell tracked continuous glucose monitors across 1,000 participants and found that certain foods produce dramatic blood sugar spikes in almost everyone, regardless of their baseline health. Not occasionally, consistently. One thing before we go further, this is not medical advice, and I'm not your doctor. What I am is someone who has spent a considerable amount of time reading research papers, so you don't have to. You're welcome. Stay through number 3, because the food at number 3 is sitting in roughly 80% of healthy breakfast routines right now. And what it does to your insulin in the first hour of the day sets your metabolic tone for the next 6 hours. Now let's get into what's actually happening inside your body. Because right now, whether you feel it or not, your pancreas is operating like a factory that received a surprise order for 10,000 units. It's working, it's functional, but it is not thriving. And the 5 foods you're about to hear are a big reason why. Food 1, fruit juice, including the fresh squeezed kind you feel virtuous about. You know the man who switched from soda to orange juice because he's watching his health. Genuinely admirable intention. Also, metabolically, almost identical outcome. Here's the mechanism. Whole fruit contains fiber. That fiber physically slows the absorption of fructose and glucose. It acts like a speed bump in your digestive tract. The moment you juice the fruit, you strip out the fiber entirely. What remains is a liquid delivery system for sugar that hits your bloodstream faster than most sodas. Think of it this way. A whole orange is a controlled release capsule. Orange juice is that same dose delivered intravenously. Same compound, completely different speed. A 2013 study in the British Medical Journal followed over 187,000 adults and found that people who consumed fruit juice regularly had a 21% increased risk of developing type 2 diabetes, while whole fruit consumption was associated with reduced risk. Same fruit, opposite outcomes. The only variable was the fiber. Eat the fruit. Drink water. Your pancreas will send a thank you card. Food 2, whole wheat bread. But here's the kicker. The bread in your kitchen that says whole grain, multigrain, or made with whole wheat. That bread is not what you think it is. The glycemic index of whole wheat bread sits at approximately 71. White bread sits at around 75. You spend 3 extra minutes reading the label in the grocery store to end up in essentially the same metabolic place. That is a lot of effort for very little payoff. Here's what's happening. Modern wheat is milled so finely, even so-called whole wheat flour, that the particle size is microscopic. Your digestive enzymes break it down almost instantaneously. There's no structural resistance. It's a wall that's been ground into sand. It looks different. It does not behave differently inside your body. A 2019 study in Cell Metabolism ran a crossover trial and found that whole wheat bread produced blood sugar responses nearly identical to refined white bread in most participants. The researchers described the results as surprisingly similar. Surprising to them, maybe, not anymore to you. The practical move. If the first ingredient isn't a whole grain kernel, actual oats, barley, or cracked wheat, the whole grain claim on the front of the package is mostly marketing theater. Food 3, flavored yogurt. Let me show you what's actually happening when you eat that small cup of vanilla or strawberry yogurt you packed for lunch, because you're being responsible about your health. Plain Greek yogurt is genuinely good for you. High protein, beneficial bacteria, moderate glycemic response. That is not what most men are eating. Most men are eating what is effectively pudding with a fitness influencer's endorsement. A single serving of standard flavored yogurt, the kind in the small plastic cup, can contain anywhere from 20 to 29 grams of added sugar. For reference, that's roughly the sugar content of 3 Oreo cookies, except this one has a picture of fruit on the label, so your brain categorizes it as a health decision. Your insulin doesn't read the label, It just sees the glucose load arriving and responds accordingly, like a bouncer who doesn't care what your name is, only how many people just walked through the door. A 2019 meta-analysis in Advances in Nutrition found that high added sugar intake was significantly associated with increased markers of insulin resistance in men over 40, independent of total calorie consumption. The fix is simple. Buy plain Greek yogurt, add whole berries yourself. You've just cut the sugar by 80% and added fiber back in. You've also saved about $1 per serving, which is unrelated to your blood sugar but still worth mentioning. Food 4, granola and granola bars. Here's where it gets interesting and a little frustrating, because granola might be the single greatest branding achievement in the history of food marketing. Oats, nuts, seeds. That sounds like a metabolic win. But here's what actually happens during production. Granola is made by coating those ingredients in oil and sugar and baking them at high heat. The result is a calorie-dense, rapidly digestible carbohydrate cluster that routinely clocks in between 44 and 62 on the glycemic index. And that's before you add the dried fruit that comes standard in most commercial versions. Dried fruit is its own category of blood sugar ambush. When you remove water from a grape, you don't remove the sugar. You concentrate it. A small box of raisins contains roughly the same sugar load as a full bunch of grapes, compressed into something you can eat in 45 seconds without thinking. A 2020 study in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that meals high in dried fruit and granola combinations produced postprandial glucose spikes, comparable to high glycemic refined carbohydrate meals in middle-aged men. Your body is not judging the ingredient list. It's measuring the glucose arriving in your bloodstream. And a handful of granola is sending a signal your pancreas interprets as an emergency. Drop a comment right now. Where are you watching from? And what's the one thing about blood sugar you wish someone had explained to you sooner? Seriously, I read them all. Food 5, sports drinks and vitamin waters. This one is almost too easy, but it keeps showing up in the meal logs of men who otherwise eat well. So here we are. The logic goes like this. You work out. You sweat. You need electrolytes. Therefore, a brightly colored beverage with the word hydrate on the label is a smart choice. This logic is correct in approximately one specific scenario. You're a competitive endurance athlete training for over 90 continuous minutes. If that is not you, you're drinking sugar water with a performance costume on. A standard 20-ounce sports drink contains around 34 grams of sugar and 160 calories. Vitamin water, which sounds almost pharmaceutical, contains up to 32 grams of sugar per bottle. Your body processes this the same way it processes a can of soda. Identically, there is no metabolic discount for good intentions. A 2015 study in the journal Circulation found that regular consumption of sugary sports and energy drinks was independently associated with increased risk of type 2 diabetes and metabolic syndrome in men, separate from other dietary factors. Water hydrates you. Electrolyte tablets with no sugar cost about 30 cents each. This is a solved problem that a multi-billion-dollar industry has successfully complicated. Here's the bottom line. You are not failing at your health because of laziness. You are failing, in many cases, because you were handed a map drawn by the people selling you the wrong roads. Your pancreas is not broken. Your metabolic machinery is not the problem. The problem is information. Specifically, the gap between what the food industry calls healthy and what your glucose monitor would actually show you if you wore one for a week. Cut the juice. Read past the first line on the bread label. Go plain on the yogurt. Treat granola like a dessert, because metabolically, that's what it is. And drink water like the simple, effective, zero-drama solution it has always been. If this video clarified something you've been confused about for years, share it with one man over 40 who needs to hear it. That one conversation might matter more than you think.